When she turned 18, they gave her a cardboard box, a bus ticket, and a silver locket that had been held in storage for a decade. What she found inside it would unravel a history of sacrifice she never knew and open a door to a place her family had tried to forget. This is the story of how a forgotten key gave me back not just my home, but my entire life. And if you've ever felt like your own story was written by someone else, stick around. We've got a lot to talk about, so hit that subscribe button and let's get into it. The day I aged out of the system felt less like a liberation and more like being pushed out of a moving car. 18 years old, legally an adult, functionally a ghost. Mr. Henderson, my caseworker for the last 5 of those years, had the decency to look uncomfortable. He slid the box across his battleship gray desk, the friction of cardboard on laminate the only sound in the sterile office. "This is it, Alara. Everything your mother left." His voice was tired, stretched thin by too many cases just like mine. I stared at the box. It was small, sealed with yellowing tape. For 10 years, my entire past had been compressed into that small, sad rectangle. I didn't know whether to scream or cry, so I did neither. I just nodded. He handed me an envelope containing the bus ticket and a few $100s, the state's parting gift. "There's the deed, too," he added, tapping a thicker manila envelope inside the box. "The property in Blackwood Creek. It's officially yours now. Frankly, the state considers it a liability. Uninhabitable. You'd be better off selling it for the land value, whatever that might be." I flinched at the word liability. It felt too close to how I'd been described in my own files. The final item he passed over was a small velvet pouch. "This was on her, I'm told. They let you keep it when you were a kid, but it was put in storage when you entered the group home. Policy." I took the pouch. Inside, I felt the familiar, cool weight of my mother's locket. A simple silver oval, tarnished with age, on a delicate chain. It was the only thing I had that was truly hers, the only thing I remembered her wearing. The drive to the bus station was silent. Mr. Henderson tried to fill it with practical advice about shelters and job programs, but his words were just static. My focus was on the locket in my palm. I'd spent countless nights tracing its smooth surface, trying to conjure a memory of the woman who wore it. Her face was a blur, a collection of half-remembered smiles and the scent of lavender. The official story was a car accident, a single-vehicle crash on a rainy night. I was in the back seat, miraculously unharmed. They said I was lucky. It never felt like luck. At the station, the air thick with diesel fumes and the low murmur of weary travelers, Mr. Henderson gave me a final, clumsy pat on the shoulder. "Good luck, Alara." And then he was gone. Another chapter closed, another file stamped, case closed. I was alone, sitting on a hard plastic bench with a box of ghosts and a one-way ticket to nowhere I wanted to go. I clutched the locket, a desperate anchor in a sea of uncertainty. My thumb brushed against a tiny, almost invisible seam on its side. I'd felt it before, 1,000,000 times, but had always assumed it was just part of the design. But today, something was different. A flicker of defiance, maybe. A refusal to be just a liability. With my fingernail, I pried at the seam. It resisted, then gave way with a faint click. The locket didn't open to reveal a space for a photo. It split into 2 halves, and nestled in a tiny, velvet-lined hollow was something else entirely. It wasn't a picture. It was a key. It was impossibly small, made of dark, old brass, with a simple, notched bit and an ornate, circular head. It was a key for a jewelry box, maybe, or a diary. It was too small for a door. Useless, another dead end. I snapped the locket shut, the click echoing the closing of a door in my heart. The bus hissed as it pulled up to the curb, its destination glowing in orange digital letters. Northbound. Blackwood Creek wasn't on the route, but a stop 20 miles from it was. The bus ticket was for that stop. It seemed the state had made a decision for me. I looked at the ticket, then at the box. Inside was a deed to a place I couldn't remember, a place no one wanted. Maybe they were right. Maybe I should sell it, take the money, and disappear. Start over, become someone new. But the weight of the tiny key in my hand felt less like a trinket and more like a question. A question my mother had left for me to answer. And I realized, with a sudden, chilling certainty, that I couldn't run from a past I didn't even understand. I had to go back. I had to know. I stood up, slung my worn backpack over my shoulder, and dragged the box onto the bus. The doors sighed shut behind me, sealing me in with the ghosts of my past and a future that was a complete, terrifying blank. The journey was a blur of gray highways and rain-streaked windows. I watched towns bleed into one another, each one a mirror of the last, filled with people who had homes to go to, people who belonged. I felt like a particle of dust, floating through a world I wasn't part of. I spent most of the ride with the box on my lap, my hand resting on the locket, now tucked back inside my shirt, warm against my skin. I took out the manila envelope Mr. Henderson had mentioned. The deed was inside, on thick, brittle paper. The estate of Sarah Caldwell, it read, followed by a string of legal jargon that meant nothing to me. But below it was an address, 14 Finch Lane, Blackwood Creek. There was also a property tax notice, stamped past due in angry red ink. The amount wasn't astronomical, but to someone with $342 to their name, it might as well have been $1 million. There was a letter attached, from a company called Apex Holdings, LLC. It was dated 2 weeks ago. The letter was polite, professional, and utterly predatory. It offered to purchase the 14 Finch Lane property as is, clearing all outstanding tax debt as part of the deal. It spoke of revitalizing the region, of community development. The offer was for $10,000. The signature was a crisp, impersonal scrawl above the name Marcus Thorne, head of acquisitions. $10,000. It felt like a fortune. It was a clean slate, a new life. An apartment deposit, new clothes, food for months. It was the smart choice, the logical choice. The choice Mr. Henderson would have advised me to take without a second thought. I folded the letter and put it back in the envelope, my stomach twisting. Selling meant letting go of the last physical piece of my mother. It meant agreeing with the state that her home, our home, was just a liability. It felt like a betrayal. I didn't know what I was looking for, but I knew I wouldn't find it by signing a piece of paper and walking away. The bus dropped me off at a desolate crossroads with a single blinking yellow light. The town of Harmony was a gas station, a diner, and a post office. Blackwood Creek wasn't a town at all, just a name on a map for a rural stretch of county 20 miles deep into the woods. The gas station attendant, a woman with kind eyes and a weary face, told me there were no cabs. "Old Man Hemlock sometimes gives folks a ride if he's heading that way," she said, pointing a thumb toward a rusty pickup truck parked by the air pump. Old Man Hemlock turned out to be a man whose face was a road map of wrinkles and whose silence was as vast as the surrounding forest. He grunted when I told him the address, his eyes flickering with something I couldn't read. Recognition? Pity? "That place is still standing?" he finally rasped, his voice like gravel. "Figured the woods would have swallowed it whole by now." He agreed to take me for $20. The ride was bumpy and quiet. We drove down paved roads that turned to gravel, then to deeply rutted dirt tracks. The trees grew thicker, their branches knitting together overhead, plunging the lane into a perpetual twilight. The air grew cooler, smelling of damp earth and pine. It felt like driving back in time. Finally, he pulled to a stop where the dirt track dissolved into an overgrown field. "This is it," he said, gesturing with his chin toward a break in the trees. "Lane's washed out. You'll have to walk the rest of the way. About a quarter-mile in." I paid him, and he took the money without a word, his gaze lingering on the small box I pulled from the back of his truck. "You planning on staying?" The question hung in the air, heavy with unasked warnings. "I don't know yet," I answered honestly. He just shook his head slowly, a deep sigh escaping his chest. "Some things are better left buried, kid." He put the truck in gear, and with a final, sorrowful look, drove away, leaving me in a cloud of dust and an unnerving silence broken only by the chirping of insects. I stood there for a long moment, the box feeling heavier than it had before. The path he'd pointed to was barely visible, a faint suggestion of a trail swallowed by weeds and creeping vines. A rusted, wrought-iron gate, half off its hinges, marked the entrance. One of the posts still bore a faded wooden sign, the letters barely legible. Finch. Taking a deep breath, I pushed the gate open. It groaned in protest, a sound of long disuse. I hefted the box and started walking, stepping into the shadows of the trees, toward a house I didn't remember and a past that was waiting to be unearthed. The walk was more of a struggle. Thorny bushes snagged at my jeans, and unseen roots tried to trip me with every step. The air was thick and humid, alive with the buzzing of unseen life. After what felt like an eternity, the trees thinned, and I stepped into a clearing. And there it was. The house wasn't just uninhabitable, it was a skeleton. A 2-story farmhouse, its white paint peeled away to reveal weathered gray wood beneath. The porch roof sagged dangerously, held up by one remaining pillar like a weary old man leaning on a cane. Windows were broken, dark eyes staring out blankly. The yard was a wild meadow of waist-high grass and wildflowers, reclaiming what had been theirs all along. A massive oak tree stood sentinel beside the house, its branches draped in Spanish moss, casting long, dancing shadows in the late afternoon sun. It was a ruin, a beautiful, heartbreaking ruin. My heart sank. Mr. Henderson was right. This wasn't a home. It was a teardown. The $10,000 from Apex Holdings suddenly seemed not just generous, but miraculous. I walked up the creaking porch steps, each one groaning under my weight. The front door was still there, its blue paint faded to a chalky powder. There was no lock, just a hole where one used to be. It swung open with a mournful screech. The inside smelled of dust, damp, and decay. Sunlight streamed through the dirty windows, illuminating floating dust motes like tiny constellations. A layer of gray dust coated everything, a decaying sofa, an overturned chair, a pile of what looked like rotted books in the corner. It was as if everyone had left in a hurry and never looked back. I set the box down on a relatively clean patch of floor. It felt strange to be here, an intruder in my own life. I walked through the downstairs rooms, a small living room, a kitchen with rusted appliances and peeling linoleum, a dining room with a heavy wooden table still in its place, as if waiting for a family that would never return. Everything was a faded photograph of a life I couldn't access. Upstairs was the same. 2 small bedrooms. In one, a child's room, the wallpaper was patterned with faded yellow ducks. A small wooden rocking horse lay on its side in the corner. My room. The thought hit me with an unexpected force, a pang of grief so sharp it took my breath away. I ran my hand along the dusty wallpaper, trying to feel a connection, a memory, anything. But there was nothing, just a hollow ache of loss. I spent the next hour just moving through the silence, touching things, trying to piece together the life that was lived here. I found nothing of value, nothing personal. No photos on the walls, no clothes in the closets. The house had been picked clean, either by time or by people. Defeated, I went back downstairs and sat on the dusty floor next to the box. The smart thing to do was to walk back to the road, hitch a ride to town, and call the number on the Apex letter. I pulled the locket out from under my shirt. I opened it again, staring at the tiny, intricate key. Old Man Hemlock's words echoed in my mind. Some things are better left buried. What did he know? What was there to bury in a place so empty? I looked around the room, my eyes tracing the lines of the walls, the floor, the ceiling. My gaze fell on the fireplace, a large hearth made of river stones. It was filled with debris and old leaves that had blown in through the chimney. But there was something odd about the floor in front of it. A large, threadbare rug was kicked up at one corner, revealing the dark wooden floorboards beneath. Most of the floor was made of wide, uniform planks, but directly in front of the hearth, there was a section of shorter boards, forming a distinct rectangle about 4 feet by 3. The grain didn't quite match. The seams were just a little too perfect. It looked like a patch, a repair job, or a door. My heart started to beat a little faster. I crawled over and pulled the rug away completely. It was definitely a trapdoor. There was no handle, no ring to pull. The edges were flush with the surrounding floor. But on one side, nestled right against the stone of the hearth, was a small, dark circle. A keyhole. It was tiny, ornate, and dark with age. It wasn't for a modern key. It was for an old one. A small one. With trembling hands, I took the locket from around my neck and opened it. I took out the tiny brass key. It felt impossibly light, impossibly fragile. I knelt down, the rough floorboards pressing into my knees, and pushed the key into the lock. It slid in perfectly. A perfect fit. For a moment, I just knelt there, my hand on the key, my breath held tight in my chest. This was it. This was the reason. My mother had left this for me. She had sealed a part of our house, a part of our story, and given me the only key. I took a deep, shaky breath and turned it. There was a loud, satisfying clunk of a well-made lock disengaging. A mechanism, hidden for years, had been released. I pulled the key out and looked for a way to lift the door. There was a small groove along the edge, just deep enough to get my fingertips under. I pulled. It was heavy, but it lifted. A wave of cool, musty air washed over my face, smelling of cellared earth, old paper, and something else. Lavender. The scent was so faint, so unexpected, it was like a whisper from the past. I propped the heavy door open and peered down into the darkness. A steep set of wooden steps led down into a small, stone-lined room. It wasn't a root cellar. It was too clean, too deliberate. The air was cool and dry, not damp and moldy like the rest of the house. This space had been protected. At the bottom of the stairs, I could just make out the shapes of several large, sealed plastic tubs and a small wooden chest. My phone's flashlight cut a bright, shaky beam through the darkness. The stone walls were solid. The floor was poured concrete. This wasn't part of the original farmhouse. This had been built later, with purpose. I descended the steps carefully, each tread creaking under my weight. The air grew cooler, the scent of lavender stronger. It was coming from a small, dried bundle of flowers hanging from a nail on the wall, a trick to keep the space from smelling stale. A mother's touch. The tubs were neatly labeled in a familiar, elegant handwriting I recognized from the single birthday card I had from her, the one I'd kept hidden in my shoe for years. The labels read, photos, schoolwork, clothes. My life packed away and preserved, but my attention was drawn to the wooden chest. It was older, bound with iron straps, and secured with a simple clasp, not a lock. It felt more important than the rest. I knelt on the concrete floor and lifted the heavy lid. Inside, there was no treasure, no money, no jewels. There was only paper. Stacks and stacks of letters, tied in bundles with faded silk ribbons. And on top of the first bundle, a single thick envelope with my name on it. Elara. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely pick it up. The paper was thick and creamy. I broke the wax seal, which was stamped with the image of a finch. My fingers trembled as I unfolded the pages within. The letter began. My dearest Elara. The script flowed across the page. If you are reading this, then I am gone, and you have come home. I am so sorry. I am sorry for leaving you, sorry for the silence, and sorry for the secrets I had to keep. Know this, first and always, I love you more than all the stars in the sky. Every choice I made to protect you. I had to stop, my vision blurring with tears. I wiped them away with the back of my dusty hand and continued reading. Her voice seemed to fill the small, silent room, a voice I barely remembered but my soul recognized instantly. This house, this land, it is more than just property. It is our story. Your great-grandmother built this home with her own hands. It has been in our family for generations. But a few years before you were born, a company, Apex Holdings, began trying to buy all the land in this valley. They want the water rights to the creek. They were ruthless, pressuring everyone, threatening them, running them off their land one by one. But our family refused to sell. This land was our life. My breath caught in my throat. Apex Holdings, the same company from the letter in my box. They were still here, still waiting. They made our lives difficult, the letter continued. They tried everything. Legal challenges, cutting off our access road, lowball offers. When your father stood up to them, he had an accident at the lumber mill. They said it was faulty equipment. I never believed it. After he died, I was alone with you, and they saw me as an easy target. They thought a grieving widow would be easy to scare, but I wasn't. I started fighting back. I started digging into their business practices, their history. I found things, Elara, things they wanted to keep buried. Financial crimes, environmental violations, blackmail. I collected proof. I documented everything. I was going to expose them. They knew it. And that's why they came for me. The letter shook in my hands. The official story, the one I'd been told my whole life, shattered into a million pieces. A car accident on a rainy night. It wasn't the rain. It wasn't an accident. It was murder. That night, she wrote, I knew they were coming. I had received a threat. I couldn't go to the police. They had people on their payroll. I had only one priority. You. I packed your life into these tubs. I wrote this letter. And I put the key that opens this cellar, our secret heart, into the locket I knew you would never take off. I put you in the car, strapped you into your car seat, and told you we were going on an adventure. I was trying to get you to your aunt's house, 3 counties away. They ran me off the road. It was deliberate. They made it look like an accident. But they didn't get what they were looking for. The evidence. It was never in the car. It was never in the house. It's here, Elara. In this cellar. In the false bottom of this very chest. I stopped reading, my heart pounding against my ribs like a trapped bird. I looked at the chest, the false bottom. I ran my hands along the inside, feeling for a seam, a ridge, anything. Near the back, my fingers found a slight indentation. I pressed it, and a section of the wooden floor of the chest popped up with a soft click. Beneath it was a cavity, and inside that cavity was a heavy, leather-bound ledger and a stack of financial documents held together with a thick rubber band. The proof. She had saved it. She had hidden it. She had died for it. Tears streamed down my face now, hot and silent. They weren't just tears of grief for the mother I'd lost, but tears of awe for the woman I was just beginning to know. She wasn't just a victim. She was a fighter. A warrior who had laid down her life to protect her child and her home. They will try to take this house from you, the letter concluded. They will offer you money. It will seem like a lot. It will seem like the easy way out. But this land is your inheritance, Alara. Not for its monetary value, but for its spirit. It is a place to be strong, a place to be free. The choice is yours, my love. You can take their money and run. I will not blame you. You deserve a life of peace. Or you can stay. You can fight. You can finish what I started. The evidence is yours now. Whatever you choose, know that my love is with you always. Be brave, my little finch. Your loving mother. I folded the letter, my hands slick with tears, and held it to my chest. The cool, quiet cellar seemed to hold its breath, waiting for my decision. For 10 years, I had been a ward of the state, a number in a file, a ghost drifting through other people's houses. I had no anchor, no story, no one. But in this dusty, forgotten cellar, surrounded by the scent of lavender and the fierce, unyielding love of a woman I barely knew, I had found it all. I was not a liability. I was a legacy. The hollow ache in my chest, the one I had carried for a decade, was suddenly filled with a white-hot purpose. They had taken my mother. They had taken my childhood. They would not take my home. The choice wasn't a choice at all. I was staying. I was going to fight, and I was going to win. The emotional dam that had been holding back a decade of grief, confusion, and loneliness finally broke. I sat on the cold concrete floor of that hidden cellar, my mother's letter clutched in my hand, and I wept. I cried for the little girl who woke up in a hospital room to a world that no longer made sense. I cried for the years spent in sterile group homes, feeling invisible, untethered. I cried for the mother whose face I could barely remember, but whose fierce love now wrapped around me like a shield. It was a wrenching, gutting sob that seemed to pull the poison of the past 10 years out of me. When the tears finally subsided, I was left with a strange sense of calm, a quiet, steely resolve settling deep in my bones. I wasn't just Alara, the foster kid. I was Alara Caldwell, daughter of Sarah Caldwell, and I had work to do. Listen, if you've ever reached a point in your life where everything you thought was true turned out to be a lie, you know the feeling. It's like the ground falls away beneath you. But sometimes, in that free fall, you learn how to fly. If this is hitting you, if you've ever had to redefine your own story, let me know in the comments. You're not alone in this. This community is for people who have been through it and are still standing. Now, back to that cellar. I spent the next hour carefully examining the contents of the hidden compartment. The ledger was filled with my mother's neat, meticulous handwriting. It detailed payments, dates, and names, a complex web of bribery and intimidation orchestrated by Apex Holdings. She had cross-referenced everything with the financial documents, which appeared to be internal company memos and bank statements someone had leaked to her. It was a comprehensive, damning case against them. She had done all the work. All I had to do was find the courage to use it. My first priority was survival. The house was a wreck, but the cellar was secure and dry. I decided it would be my base of operations. I hauled the tubs of my belongings out, looking for anything practical. I found blankets, a few old towels, and a box of camping supplies that included a battery-powered lantern and a small propane stove. My mother, ever practical, had prepared for a siege. As dusk began to settle, painting the dusty windows of the house in shades of orange and purple, I made my first meal in my ancestral home. A can of lukewarm beans I'd bought at the gas station, eaten on the porch steps, watching the fireflies begin their nightly dance in the tall grass. The house was silent, but it no longer felt empty. It felt like it was waiting, holding its breath alongside me. The next morning, I walked the long track back to the main road. My phone had no service at the house, but if I walked half a mile toward town, I could get a weak signal. I had to make a call. I didn't have a lawyer, but my mother's letter had mentioned a name: Benjamin Carter. A good man, she'd written on a small note tucked into the ledger. The only lawyer in town who wasn't afraid of them. He helped me start this. I found his number in the local online directory. A woman answered, her voice warm. Carter Law? I took a breath. My name is Ilara Caldwell. I need to speak with Mr. Carter. It's about my mother, Sarah Caldwell. There was a pause on the other end of the line. Please hold. I waited, my heart hammering. What if he wouldn't help me? What if he'd forgotten? A man's voice, calm and measured, came on the line. This is Ben Carter. How can I help you, Miss Caldwell? My mother. She left me some documents, I started, my voice unsteady. Regarding Apex Holdings. She said you helped her. The silence that followed was heavy. I could hear him breathing, thinking. Sarah, he said, his voice thick with an old sadness. I haven't heard that name in a long time. I thought, after the accident, I thought everything was lost. Where are you? I'm at the house, I told him. 14 Finch Lane. Stay there, he said, his voice suddenly urgent. Don't talk to anyone. Don't let anyone on the property. I'll be there in an hour. The line went dead. The walk back to the house was filled with a new kind of anxiety. It was one thing to have a secret purpose. It was another to invite the outside world into it. An hour later, a dusty Subaru bumped its way up the overgrown lane. Ben Carter was older than I expected, with kind, intelligent eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses and a head of unruly silver hair. He looked more like a history professor than a small-town lawyer. He got out of the car and just stared at the house for a long moment, a sad smile on his face. She loved this place, he said, more to himself than to me. Fought like a lioness for it. He turned to me, his gaze analytical but gentle. You have her eyes. We sat at the dusty dining room table, and I told him everything. About aging out, the locket, the key, the cellar. I watched his face as I spoke, saw his initial skepticism melt into astonishment, and then into a slow, dawning hope. When I finished, I pushed the ledger across the table toward him. He opened it, his long, careful fingers tracing my mother's handwriting. He was silent for a long time, turning the pages, his eyes scanning the columns of figures and names. My God, he whispered, finally looking up at me. She did it. She actually did it. We had suspicions, rumors, but this is the whole conspiracy on paper. He explained the situation to me in starker terms than the letter had. Apex didn't just want the water rights. They had discovered a rare mineral deposit deep under the valley, and my family's property was sitting right on top of the mother lode. It was worth millions, perhaps hundreds of millions. The $10,000 offer wasn't just an insult. It was a calculated act of fraud. They've been waiting for you to turn 18, Ben explained, his voice grim. They knew the property would transfer to you. They figured a kid who'd grown up in the system would be desperate, would see $10,000 as a lottery win, and would sign it away without a second thought. They've been playing the long game. He taps the letter from Apex that I'd shown him. Marcus Thorne. He's the son of the company's founder. He's ruthless, even more so than his father. He's the one who was running things back when your mother died. A cold dread washed over me. This wasn't some faceless corporation. This was a man who had a name, a man who had, in all likelihood, ordered my mother's death. What do we do? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Ben closed the ledger and looked me straight in the eye. His expression was serious, a warning and a promise all in one. We have two options, he said. Option 1, we take this ledger to the state attorney general. With this evidence, we could probably put Thorne and his associates in prison for a very long time. It would be a huge public fight. Messy, dangerous. Apex has deep pockets and powerful friends. He paused, letting the weight of that sink in. Option 2, he continued, leaning forward, is we use this as leverage. We go to them quietly. We show them a little of what we have. We make it clear that a public trial would ruin them, and we negotiate a settlement that not only protects your land, but compensates you for the last 10 years and for the loss of your mother. You mean we let them get away with it? The idea felt like a betrayal of everything my mother had fought for. Not get away with it, Ben corrected gently. We make them pay. We force them to sign a binding agreement that protects this entire valley, not just your land. We make them establish a conservation trust. We make them funded with enough money to ensure no one can ever touch this place again. And yes, we make them pay you a settlement so large you'll never have to worry about money again. It's not justice in a courtroom, Ilara, but it might be a more lasting, practical form of it. Your mother wanted to protect this place. This would achieve that. Permanently. The choice was paralyzing. One path offered vengeance, a public battle for justice that could easily get me killed. The other offered peace, security, and the guaranteed protection of my home. But it meant the men responsible for my mother's death would never face a criminal trial. What would she have wanted? I thought of her final words in the letter. You deserve a life of peace. She hadn't told me to get revenge. She had told me to be brave and to choose. I looked out the window at the ancient oak tree, its branches reaching for the sky like steadfast arms. My mother's goal was to save this land. A public fight, even if we won, could drag on for years, leaving the fate of the valley in limbo. A settlement, if we could force it, would be ironclad. It was the choice of a protector, not an avenger. Option 2, I said, my voice clearer and stronger than I thought possible. We protect the land. We finish what she started. Ben nodded slowly, a look of profound respect in his eyes. All right, he said. Let's show Mr. Thorne what a real liability looks like. The next few days were a whirlwind. Ben worked on drafting a legal proposal, while I focused on the house. I couldn't afford repairs, but I could make it clean. I swept away the dust and the cobwebs, washed the windows, and scrubbed the floors. With each swipe of the rag, I felt like I was clearing away not just the grime of a decade, but the neglect of my own past. I was tending to my home, and in doing so, I was tending to myself. I explored the tubs in the cellar more thoroughly. I found photo albums filled with pictures of my parents. A smiling, vibrant woman with my eyes. A handsome, laughing man with his arm around her. Pictures of me as a baby, a toddler, a family. It was painful to look at, a life I'd been robbed of, but it was also healing. It proved that I came from love, a love so strong it had reached across death and time to protect me. A week after Ben's visit, a sleek black car, wildly out of place, made its way up the dirt lane. I was on the porch, watching it approach, my heart pounding. Ben had called them. This was their answer. Marcus Thorne stepped out of the car. He was younger than I'd imagined, dressed in an expensive suit that looked ridiculous in the rustic setting. He had a cold, handsome face and the predatory stillness of a shark. He wasn't here to negotiate. He was here to intimidate. "Ilara Caldwell?" he said, his voice smooth and confident. He didn't bother introducing himself. He didn't have to. I just nodded, not trusting myself to speak. I refused to let him see my fear. "I'll get straight to the point," he said, stopping at the bottom of the porch steps, looking up at me. "My company has made you a generous offer for this worthless piece of land. I'm here to finalize it. I've even brought the paperwork and a cashier's check." He held up a briefcase. "My offer is now $15,000. Sign the papers and you can walk away from this ruin and start a real life." His tone was condescending, dismissive. He saw me exactly as he was supposed to. A desperate, ignorant kid he could easily manipulate. I stayed silent, letting him talk. "Your lawyer, Carter, is a senile old fool living in the past, Thorne continued, a smirk playing on his lips. He's filling your head with nonsense. There's nothing here for you but bad memories and overdue taxes. Take the money. It's the smartest move you'll ever make. I finally found my voice. It was quiet, but it didn't tremble. It's not for sale. Thorne's smirk faltered. He blinked, as if he hadn't heard me correctly. I don't think you understand your position, little girl. This isn't a negotiation. And I don't think you understand mine, Mr. Thorne, I said, and for the first time, I felt the strength of my mother standing with me. This is my home. You are trespassing. I'm going to have to ask you to leave. His face hardened, the mask of civility dropping away to reveal the ugliness beneath. You're making a big mistake, he hissed. A mistake you will regret. The only mistake, I said, stepping forward to the edge of the porch so I was looking down on him, was thinking that Sarah Caldwell's daughter would be as easy to get rid of as she was. The color drained from his face. It was a direct hit, and he knew it. For a split second, I saw pure, unadulterated fury in his eyes, quickly masked by a cold composure. He knew, somehow, that I had something. He didn't know what, but the bluff had landed. He gave me a long, chilling look, a look that promised retribution. Then, without another word, he turned, got back in his car, and sped away, leaving a cloud of angry dust hanging in the air. As the sound of his car faded, the adrenaline left me, and my knees felt weak. I sank down onto the top step of the porch, my body trembling. I had faced the monster, and I hadn't backed down. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every creak of the old house, every rustle in the trees, sounded like a threat. Thorne's parting look was burned into my mind. He wasn't going to give up. The next morning, Ben called. He's scared, Ben said, a note of satisfaction in his voice. I just received a call from his lawyer. They want a meeting. They're ready to talk. The meeting took place a week later in Ben's small, book-lined office. It was me and Ben on one side of a polished table, and Marcus Thorne and two expensive-looking lawyers on the other. The air was thick with tension. Thorne refused to look at me, directing all his comments to Ben. His lawyers did the talking, starting with a new offer, $50,000, and a threat of legal action for slander. Ben just smiled calmly. He slid a single piece of paper across the table. It was a high-quality photocopy of one page from my mother's ledger, a page detailing a specific illegal payment to a county inspector, with a corresponding bank statement showing the transfer. Thorne's lead lawyer picked it up. He read it, his face impassive, and passed it to Thorne. Thorne's eyes scanned the page, and a muscle in his jaw clenched. It was the first crack in his perfect facade. We have the entire ledger, Ben said quietly, and all the supporting documentation. We know about the bribes, the blackmail, the environmental crimes, and we know about the night Sarah died. Those are baseless accusations, the lawyer snapped, but his voice lacked conviction. Are they? Ben replied, his voice still soft, but with an edge of steel. We can let a jury decide. Or you can look at the proposal in front of you. He pushed a folder across the table. Thorne opened it reluctantly. He read for several minutes, his face growing paler with every page. The proposal was Ben's masterpiece. It laid out our demands: the creation of the Blackwood Creek Conservation Trust, an endowment of $20 million from Apex to fund it in perpetuity, the relinquishing of all mineral and water rights in the valley, and a private settlement of $5 million to me for damages, including wrongful death. In exchange, the ledger and all its contents would be turned over and sealed. When he finished reading, Thorne slammed the folder shut. This is extortion! No, Ben said. This is the price of your silence. It's the price of what you took from my client. And frankly, considering the alternative is federal prison, I think it's a bargain. The lawyers began to bluster, to argue, but Thorne held up a hand, silencing them. He stared at me, his eyes burning with a cold, impotent rage. He had been beaten. He knew it. He had underestimated the quiet girl in the ruined house. He had underestimated the fierce love of a mother reaching out from beyond the grave. "You'll have your answer in 24 hours, he said, his voice clipped. And with that, they stood up and walked out. The next day, Ben called. They had accepted. Every single term. I sat on the porch of the house, the phone pressed to my ear, looking out at the wild meadow and the ancient oak tree. I had won. My mother had won. We had saved it. The weeks that followed were filled with legalities. Papers were signed, accounts were created, and the Blackwood Creek Conservation Trust became a reality, with Ben Carter as its director. The first thing the trust did was formally declare the entire valley a protected nature preserve, forever safe from development. The money from the settlement arrived in a bank account Ben had set up for me. Seeing the number on the screen felt unreal, like it belonged to someone else. It was more money than I could comprehend. But it wasn't the money that mattered. It was what it represented. Freedom, security, and a future my mother had died to give me. The first check I wrote was to the county tax office. The second was to a local contractor. The house needed more than just a cleaning. It needed to be brought back to life. I wanted to restore it, not modernize it. I wanted to keep its soul intact. The work was slow and methodical. I was there every day, learning alongside the builders, sanding floorboards, helping to glaze windows, choosing paint colors. I wanted my own hands to help heal the house, just as being there was healing me. As the months passed, the skeleton of the house began to put on flesh again. The sagging porch was leveled, the roof replaced, the broken windows mended. A fresh coat of white paint made it gleam in the sun. It started to look like the house in the old photographs, a home filled with light and hope. I spent my evenings in the cellar, carefully sorting through the tubs. I put the photos in new, acid-free albums. I read my mother's journals. I learned about her love for gardening, her favorite books, her dreams for me. I was getting to know her, piece by piece. In her writings, I found a woman of incredible strength, intelligence, and a deep, abiding love for the natural world. I realized that the fight against Apex wasn't just about property. It was about protecting a way of life, about defending the wild, beautiful places of the world from greed. One evening, I was sitting on the newly finished porch, watching the sunset paint the sky. The house was quiet. The air smelled of freshly cut wood and blooming honeysuckle. Old Man Hemlock's truck rumbled up the lane. He hadn't been by since the day he dropped me off. He got out and stood for a moment, looking at the restored house, a look of quiet amazement on his weathered face. "Heard you were staying," he said, his voice still gravelly. "I am," I said, smiling. "This is my home." He nodded, a slow, deep nod of approval. "Your mother would be proud," he said. "She was a good woman. Never backed down from a fight." He reached into his truck and pulled out a small, wooden crate. "Housewarming gift," he grunted, setting it on the porch. It was filled with vegetable seedlings, tomatoes, cucumbers, squash. "This land has good soil. Time something grew here again." It was a peace offering, an apology for his warning, an acceptance. I was no longer an outsider. I was part of this place. That night, as I lay in my own bed, in my own room, the one with the yellow ducks, now freshly painted, I thought about the journey that had brought me here. It started with a key, a tiny piece of brass that unlocked so much more than a cellar. It unlocked a history, a purpose, a future. It unlocked the truth of who I was and where I came from. It taught me that home isn't just a building, it's a legacy. It's the stories and the struggles of those who came before us. An inheritance isn't about money. It's about the values and the courage they pass down to us. My mother left me a home, yes, but she also left me a choice: to be a victim of my past or the author of my future. And in choosing to fight, in choosing to stay, I had finally, truly, come home. The story doesn't end there, of course. It's really just beginning. Rebuilding a house is one thing, rebuilding a life is another. But for the first time, I feel like I have a solid foundation to build on. And that's the lesson here, isn't it? Sometimes the things that seem like liabilities, the abandoned places, the broken histories, the parts of ourselves we've been told are worthless, are actually the source of our greatest strength. They hold the keys to who we are meant to be. So I want to ask you, what's the forgotten cellar in your life? What's the story you've been told that maybe isn't the whole truth? The answers might be waiting for you in the places you're most afraid to look. Thank you for being here, for listening to my story. If it resonated with you, please consider subscribing to the channel. We're building a community here for people who aren't afraid to dig into the past to build a better future. Share your own story in the comments below. I read every one. And remember, you are not a liability. You are a legacy.